Hey everyone, I'm Critbuff with Planet Destiny, and I'll be going over all the most recent changes that patch 2.1.4 brought to the Hunter subclasses. I'll talk about those changes in the order that Bungie presented them. I'll start off with the new Golden Gun buffs, then go into the rework to the Bottom Tree's Practice Makes Perfect perk to make the super even more powerful in PvE. After that, I'll discuss the rework to the Way of the Pathfinder super Mobius Quiver. Finally, I'll finish up with how the Arcstrider super attack combination damage has changed. There's also a modification made to the Lethal Current perk found in the Way of the Warrior subclass tree that I'll get into there. So up first are the new and improved Golden Gun supers. Bungie buffed both versions of the super to deal 40% more damage to bosses in PvE. For Golden Gun 6-shooter, the base damage was increased from 275 to 300 per shot, and kills now return a bullet to the Golden Gun's magazine. So with this new version of the super, you can keep firing your Golden Gun as long as you score kills during its duration. I was kinda hoping for a bigger rework to the super to make it more like Bottom Tree Dawnblade, but no, it's still the same timer we had before. This change makes the super much more effective at ad clearing in PvE, and more forgiving if you miss a few shots here and there in the Crucible. I would even say it's worth using for the fun factor alone in Strikes and Gambit, but that's my opinion. Trust me when I say this won't be putting Bottom Tree Gunslinger out of a job anytime soon though. On that subject, let's talk about the new Way of the Sharpshooter super. Bungie buffed the Practice Makes Perfect perk to stack up to 5 times instead of 3. They also increased the perk's super regen modifier by 20%. I like the changes, but it honestly feels like you can rarely kill things quickly enough to get 5 stacks unless you're using specific weapons in specific settings. I'm not trying to turn down a buff, but I just don't think it'll be as impactful as we thought it would be. It's a good perk that helps you build up your Golden Gun quickly. I just hate that feeling of disappointment I get when I miss applying the next stack. Maybe Bungie could lengthen the duration of the perk and play with the regen numbers to make it easier to get multiple stacks, while still getting the same amount of super energy back. Now the change to Practice Makes Perfect works nicely with the big buff that Bungie made to the Celestial Nighthawk with the pre-Forsaken patch. If you don't remember the buff to the Nighthawk because of all those fire knives you've been throwing for the past few months, Bungie buffed the exotic to reward super energy while killing enemies with your single Golden Gun bullet. That was a welcome improvement to the exotic's viability and less challenging PvE content. That also made the subclass more enjoyable overall. Moving on, let's talk about those nerfs to Blade Barrage, shall we? Given this super's dominance in basically every single playlist, it was really only a matter of time before we saw Bungie hit this sucker with a nerf bat. For the numbers, the impact damage was taken way down from 150 to just 35. The explosion damage was buffed, however, from 150 to 250. As you can see, Blade Barrage's real damage was moved to the delayed explosion instead of the knife hits. If I had to say why they did this, it was probably to give players in PvP a better chance to survive a Blade Barrage attack. If you keep moving and get behind cover when you know that Hunter jumping in front of you is going to solo panic Blade Barrage you for the 3rd time this match, then you might take a few knife hits on your way to cover, but you'll have a much better chance to live if you can dodge the explosions. Sadly, this was also a nerf for PvE. You can see the difference on screen from a Blade Barrage before the change and one after. Enemies in PvE are pretty stupid, and they tend to stay still, so they should all still get hit by the knives and the explosions as well. Now of course there are those knights and wizards who have gone to the Patches O'Houlihan school of dodgeball. I swear I didn't know aliens could dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge so well, but they're there and they're doing it, so that's frustrating as always. No, this nerf probably won't keep anyone from using Blade Barrage that was set on using Blade Barrage in the first place, but the hit to the overall damage here is still painful. What's really interesting is how the new Blade Barrage works with the reworked Shards of Galanor. Bungie says they've changed the exotic to reward more super energy on the number of knife hits with the super. I guess this finally settles how this exotic really works. No more wondering if you needed to get the reticle over the targets while sprinting around 3 times and getting a double flawless fatality on the pit. That's a Mortal Kombat joke for all you older guys and gals. They're also putting a cap on the amount of super energy this exotic rewards at 75%, which is down from a total of 90% from before. It's funny to me to see Bungie come out and say publicly that the cap was 90%, because there were plenty of times that I got almost 100% of my super back. I guess even Bungie doesn't know how shards really worked. The next nerf to Blade Barrage is that the super now deals self-damage if the knives explode too closely to the player. This is probably another PvP focused change, since it was pretty common to be hit by a solo panic-induced Blade Barrage in the Crucible and Gambit. This is very similar to how Nova Bomb has killed nearly just as many Warlocks who cast it as it has the intended targets. It'll probably take some time for hunters to get used to the change, and we can all enjoy the many laughs that we'll have at their expense until then. Lastly, Bungie apparently fixed a bug where the knives would track allies.
I personally never remember experiencing this, but I'm sure it would be frustrating as heck to see your knives go flying off at a target they couldn't kill instead of stacking damage on your enemies. Changing gears to the newly reworked Nightstalker Mobius Quiver Super. Bungie starts off by saying they rebalanced the super to apply its entire damage bonus on the first tethered hit instead of stacking and then multiplying on consecutive hits. In case you hadn't used it before, and who could blame you really, the bottom tree super would let you shoot 6 consecutive tethers before it ran out of energy. Those hits would get extra damage when they hit the enemy that tethers were already on. On screen now is an example of what I'm talking about. I'm using this ability to first tether the enemy, which hits the ogre for 1056 damage, then hits again after that tether's effect takes hold for 2561 damage. My last few tethers cap out at 4353 damage. After the changes, the first hit goes for 1506, with the rest doing 7530. Bungie also buffed the bottom tree tethers to have a 20% larger radius and to last a little bit longer, although they don't say exactly how long. They also say that they, quote, made it easier to fire successive shadow shots. Why the copywriter at Bungie's communications department can't just come out and publicly say, we reduced the time between tether shots, is beyond me. But I'm a military guy, so what do I know? It was a real challenge to get used to the way the old bottom tree super worked. You could just barely fire all 6 arrows with enough time for the tethers to start going into effect and giving that extra damage to all your extra shots. Hopefully these changes combined with some nerfs to Spectral Blades may just be enough to see a bit of a resurgence for the bottom tree in PvP. Now for the part that will probably hurt those Spectral Blade mains out there the most. Bungie nerfed this super's damage resistance from 15 to 5%. This means you now have a total damage resistance of 62% while invisible in your super. They also reduced the total duration of Spectral Blades while invisible by 3.67 seconds. This shouldn't be a big surprise considering just how powerful Spectral Blades was in PvP. Bungie buffed the heck out of this thing with a previous update at the start of the season. So they're doing what they think they need to swing the pendulum back accordingly. Before pitchforks are raised, understand the damage resistance nerf isn't too radical. As an example, before it took 9 regular precision hits from Ace without Memento Mori to kill a hunter and the super. In case you were curious, it took 5 precision shots of Memento Mori rounds and 3 normal damage precision shots from Ace to do the same. After the nerf, it takes 8 normal precision hits or 5 Memento Mori and 2 regular precision hits to get the job done. So that's just 1 less shot in both cases. The hit to the super's duration while invisible means that it went from lasting about 30 seconds to 26.5-ish now. I honestly think this will likely hurt hunters without the Guishin vest more than those with it. That's unfortunate, since it seems like this nerf was directly aimed at bringing that exotic in line with where Bungie wants it to be in the meta. Alright, good news for Arcstriders. There's a very, very solid buff to your heavy ranged slam and palm attacks in all of your supers. That's great news because it means you'll probably see more folks trying these subclasses out once they learn about the buffs. To the numbers for exactly how big these changes were, both the heavy ranged and slam attack damage went from 220 to 300. The heavy palm attack that comes at the end of the light attack heavy combo was almost doubled. It was originally doing 400 damage and now it's hitting for 700. Dear Bungie Overlords, thank you. And that's not even the end of it either. They also gave a shot in the arm to the Lethal Current perk in the top tree Way of the Warrior subclass. This perk works by having you dodge before you hit your enemy, and when you do, you'll apply ticking damage to them. It's been buffed from 100 damage to 130, and that's about a 33% improvement, just shy of that. Now Bungie say they've also nerfed the damage bonus from the Radiant Flux exotic chest piece to keep the other buffs from getting out of control. They've nerfed that bonus from 20% to 13.5%. As they explain it, this change keeps the bonus damage granted by this exotic about the same. Because this is calculated on a scalar instead of a flat number, any big changes in base damage have a large effect on the exotic. So basically, since the Radiant Flux bonus worked on percentages, they had to bring that back to keep the base damage of the super's attack where they think it should be with the exotic on. I really hope that all the new buffs to Arcstrider will help it become more popular in PvP and PvE. I know I rarely see this subclass in the Crucible, Strikes, or Gambit, and that's a real shame, because it kicks all sorts of butt, and can be a ton of fun if you give it a shot. Well, that's all for the changes to the Hunter subclass supers. I'm really curious to see how the changes to the Spectral Blades and Blade Barrage supers play out. They're never done tinkering with everything, so I guess we'll find out if these nerfs were enough, or if they need to be taken back and readjusted to kind of get them in line with everything else. Now's the part of the video when I ask you to do me a huge favor and hit the like button if you liked it. I've been reading the feedback about my narration technique, and I get that my sweet, soothing vocals might be too strong a sleep aid, so I'm working on it. I'm fighting against a lot of military broadcaster training here, so bear with me, folks. I'm also currently working on videos for all the Titan and Warlock super adjustments, so you should see those this weekend if all goes according to plan. Please consider hitting that subscribe button to get the word about those when they get released. Thank you for watching today, and I'll see you next time.